City Skylines 2 is one amazing game, and straight out of the box you can make some really large and realistic looking cities. I've always wanted to build a city with massive scale, a big downtown and sprawling suburbs. City Skylines 2 offers us the perfect platform to do that on. Let's aim to get 100,000 people in our city, and let's do it all in one episode. Let's go. So we're going to do things a little backwards here. Rather than start with our downtown or CBD area, I'm going to start with some of the outer suburbs. The entire city is going to be based off an American style city, so we're going to see lots of grid patterning with the road layouts. Each one of the suburbs is going to have its sort of own high school, and maybe there's a little bit of rivalry between them and stuff. And we're also going to have lots of connector roads that run from these suburbs all the way into downtown. Maybe they're next to the highway, maybe they're an alternative way to move around. But the way I see it is these connector roads may have been the main trade routes that the entire city was based on. So maybe if we do that, the city will look a little bit more realistic. I don't know, it's worth a try. So in that regard, you can see the main road is the bottom of the grid here, and it's going to carry on through eventually, and we're just going to build a simple grid off of this. One part of it is moved away from the core, and that's where we're going to put our industry initially. And if you look closely, you'll also see that the train line is running through where I'm going to put the industry, so that could give us some options a bit later on. So our priorities at the moment are get this grid pattern in, and then we can hook up some water, some sewage, and we're going to buy some power off our neighbours to start with. Alright, so we've got some folks moved in. Now we need to move on to some city services, and the old rubbish dump is probably the first thing most players will put in. In the first city that I made, I put this right upwind from a really nice neighbourhood and wondered why they all moved out. So it's a good idea to check that wind meter early on and put this somewhere appropriate. If you decide to move it in future, it's also going to leave some serious baggage behind. This thing leaves ground pollution that takes years to clear up. So some of the other services we put in here as well are a cemetery and a primary school or an elementary school. And once we've got those city services cranking, we can start extending that grid pattern a bit further and introduce some more people into the city. We've also got a small demand for some offices, so I'll put those in mainly around the industrial area because they don't mind it, and that's generally a good little cushion between that and say your residential area. So let's start expanding out, buy a few more tiles and get a new suburb in here. What I'd like to do before we do that, however, is I'd like to run the train line in here and put a train station down here. This is going to be a fair bit away from our downtown, and if I can get this in early, it should be a really popular line. With the train station in and the depot next to it, I've got this awkward little bit of land in between them that I've got to try and do something with. I've decided to raise a road up and bring it over here on a diagonal, just so the traffic doesn't have to flow right through the middle of the suburbs, and it's going to be predominantly office space over here. So we're starting to move up through the milestones now, and you can see our main road starting to be established by the taller buildings. Almost all of my low commercial and high residential is based around this road, and I guess you could say that creates the sort of core to each suburb. This is also the point where I see all the weaknesses in the roads that I've put down, and I have to change some of the intersections to roundabouts, which is not ideal. I didn't want to use roundabouts in the city being American style, but they're going to have to suffice for now. I'll come back and change them a bit later on. The time has come now to put down a power plant and start creating our own, and you're going to see some weird funky things happening with the coal power plant, and I figured out it's because I changed my graphics settings halfway through the game, and remember I'm still on a beta version here, and the loadouts changed for it. You'll see it fix itself up eventually, but I thought it was quite funny actually. So a good little trick that I found for putting that coal power plant down and making some money, it's not really rocket science, but also it's a good idea to put down a coal producing facility. So find a good ore deposit on your map, place down the appropriate industry, and then you don't have to get anything from outside connections to create your power, and you will make a lot of money exporting that excess power back to your neighbours. So now I just want to run the simulation for a while and build up some funds so that we can really expand quickly. Oh man, that traffic's really starting to get bad. Let's add another suburb in here and make it worse. I'm really starting to get sick of the grid pattern, so we're going to add some curved sort of roads to the end of this suburb. This might be the very edge of our city and we work back the opposite way, and I'd like the curvy roads to represent maybe newer roads than the core of these suburbs. And to be fair, we could actually return back to these sorts of areas and just carry on, much like they do in real life. Bulldoze a random house out of the way, smack a couple more roads in, and jam a whole lot more housing in. So we've expanded out once more. We're going to put a college in here, and this is because I need to raise the educational level of the city in order to really build up a demand for the high residential and all those big tall buildings we love. We've got to have educated citizens. This is another reason why I decided to start with the suburbs, because by the time we get to the downtown we should have a really solid population, and we should have, more importantly, a awesome demand for those larger buildings. Did anyone else just get cold? Ooh, looks like winter's hit. Wow, you can really see it change the LUT within game. And man, it just feels cold. I like it. I think that's really cool. So before we get bombarded with snow, let's go over and make a quarry. It's a good idea to make these on a natural resource deposit, and this one here I've found is backing onto the foot of a mountain, which is a perfect place to put it, because we can use the terrain tool to step the terrain and make it look like a real quarry. There's a little bit of a trick to this so you don't get jagged lumps and bumps on the edge of your terrain, but once you nail it, you can put your ore producing facility right at the very bottom, put the paintable area right up near your terraforming, and it looks like a real life quarry. I think it looks pretty cool. You can also see there that we have expanded across the river for the first time. I've put a very simple low residential neighbourhood over here, but I'd like to run a couple of connector roads over, and this is where we're going to build our next suburb. And I'm going to go for a certain look with this one. I want this to be like an office hub. Maybe they're tech startup companies and that's what this sort of suburb is known for. This is going to be a little bit closer to our downtown, and you will notice a lot more office in this area eventually. And the road coming off this roundabout here I'm placing down is going to be that main connector road. And do you know why I'm calling it a connector road? Because I'm scared of mucking up and calling it an artillery road like I did in an earlier video. I actually really like it, but you guys made fun of me, so whatever, you know, have it your way. So here we use the same principles as that first suburb to extend off our connector road. Except this time you're going to see lots more office, lots more mixed use zoning, and just generally a more built up core to this suburb. Now's the part where I destroy most of what we just built. Nah, just kidding, but we are going to fix up the worst of the intersections, and I'm going to try and get rid of these roundabouts because they don't really suit the style of the city. So the majority of the roads I'm changing are just ones that don't really make sense, or maybe they're causing too many intersections where I can simplify things a little bit further. With that being said, there is still going to be a couple of areas where there's a little bit more space than I would like, so I'm going to turn these into parks. They're going to include some pedestrian paths that stop the citizens having to walk right round a block to get to a specific area. We'll line most of those paths with some nice planted trees, and just also put some random bushes and trees planted around the place. So I'm also trying to change these roads up a little bit so that I can accommodate a bridge going over the river from this area in future. We're going to need at least 3 or 4 different bridges linking the suburbs across the river, and they really need to have good connections back to the main roads in each of those suburbs on each side. So in essence, that road over the river is going to become a main road connecting the 2 suburbs. And with those main roads, I'll try to have as fewer intersections as possible on them. So I've taken out the roundabout here, and I'm trying to replace it with a couple of really simple one-way highway ramps, one going in each direction. Very simple, but a bit more in theme with what we're doing. So let's expand out our suburb across the river here with a bit of low residential. This is our suburb over here that's going to be predominantly offices. And while we wait for that to grow, let's do something really cool. I want to start expanding our highway network over towards where downtown is going to be now on both sides of the river. So let's start on the far side of the river from where we started, and I want a coastal highway along here. If I can, I'd like to get that highway really close to the water, and ideally it would be a keyed highway. I know, I can hear you saying it's a real waste of waterfront, but I just picture a really cool highway on the edge of the water rolling into downtown, skyscrapers in the distance. I just think that'd look really cool. So let's see if we can pull this off here with a bit of terraforming. Okay, that seemed to work pretty good. I'm happy with that. I think that looks pretty cool. So I'm going to get rid of this intersection here, and we're going to put a new interchange in here. So the first thing I need to do is do a bit of terraforming and then link this new highway up with the existing one I had running through the suburb. Once that's done and it's all tidy, we can move on to building the interchange, and let me apologise in advance, this thing is a monstrosity. Not sure what on earth I was thinking, but watch me build this, and later on we're going to change it to something way better. Well, I did try and warn yous, and ugh. The highway's in now, and we can start extending this grid pattern out. This part of the downtown here, we're going to see the buildings creep up in size gently from this area towards the middle of downtown. There's going to be a lot of row houses around here, and there's going to be the odd sort of 10 to 12 story building also. And you can see there that our connector roads are still flowing through this area. Those sorts of roads are going to continue to have the largest clusters of buildings on them. You might also notice too that I haven't got a train line going through this side of the city, and I've kind of done that deliberately. I'm going to turn our connector road into a tram line instead. A very simple tram line at that. It's just going to go pretty much from one end of the connector road near downtown right through as far as it can go into the suburbs. This may give our sort of suburbs a little bit more character, but in any case it's a really good excuse to play around with the trams anyway, which I haven't done much yet. So moving back over to the other side of the river, this is where I want the core of downtown. Even though it is going to swell over both sides of the river, the core is really going to be on this side. You can see me here experimenting with different shapes with the coastline, but eventually I'll take that out, and running the train line in here was a bit of a challenge to say the least, and most of it was being caused by that silly cutout, hence why I removed it. But eventually I want to have this train line, which is the one coming through the suburbs, just terminating in the downtown and then running back out. Even with the improvements we've done to our road, I'm still having major issues over here, and I need to change up this grid pattern pretty hardcore. There's a lot of traffic, there's lots of car accidents, and I also think there's a lot of wasted space over here because of what I've tried to do with the grid. This is actually going to be a lot closer to downtown here than I thought it would, and I'd like this to be much more grid patterned with less dead ends. I know it's very American, but in all honesty, that's kind of how this game forces us to play. I mean, it loves grids, and it's fair to say there's still a lot of limitations with the zoning when it comes to curves and things like that. So I'm also going to move the train depot because, again, I didn't realize how close it was going to be to the downtown, and these sort of teething problems are just par for the course, really. I've come to accept through years of playing City Skylines 1 that, you know, we constantly chop and change things and make them better. We're also going to make room through this area for a highway that we're going to put in right now. This highway needs to run over this side of the river close to our industrial area, and then we'll link back into the downtown through a big interchange when we get there eventually. There's a lot of reasons to run a highway over this side, but the main ones are the industry at the moment has to go right through all the suburbs and connector roads to get over to the highway, and number two, the cars that are coming in on the highway have to go right through the suburbs to get to an office, for instance, or the train station. So let's put another highway over here so that there's plenty of options for people bringing private cars in. So at this point I've established where I want the back edge of the city to sit, and this is where I'd like to have it transition into some farmland. I'm really only doing this for looks, but I was lucky enough to have a fertile patch of land down here that was perfectly placed for it, and I'm being sure as well to change up those industries. So some of them are chickens, some of them are wheat, some of them are cotton, and they're all sort of trying to satisfy a certain demand. It all helps within game and helps me gather money to blow on unnecessary things. We've also got everything in place that we need over here of vital importance. So the train depot's where it needs to be, the highways coming through, everything's connected up. So now I'm going to fill in the space in between with some suburbs. Good old suburban sprawl, and this is where we're going to see those roads start to curve a little bit more. I'm also going to plant some trees in the gaps between all of these things that I'm hoping to have grown within the next 10 years. Then I'm going to carry on with those roads, trying to make them a little bit more efficient. Some of them are going to be underneath roads and some of them will be overpasses, but just sticking with that original plan of tidying everything up and making it work a bit better. This is exactly where we're going to have the core of our downtown, and the highway running through this area is going to be a sunken type, so we need to sink the terrain down a little bit and make a little trench for the highway and then put some quay walls either side of that. The quay walls are going to be one-way roads, and these are also going to double as our on and off ramps at either end of the highway. So with that done, we're pretty well ready to get the roads and the grid pattern all set up for the downtown area. I just want to bring the train line right through to where we're going to have that main station within the CBD, and then we can really get stuck into getting all these roads in place and ready to build on. One of the biggest things we can do with City Skylines 2 in terms of detailing, at least at this point, is terraforming. Terraforming different shaped coastlines and adding quays, for instance, can add a massive visual difference to your city. I would like our downtown to have a really nice formal coastline. Not all of it, some of it's going to be a little bit rough and a little bit natural, but some nice big buildings in the background are going to look really nice up against this. So I'm just going to do a couple of little cutouts. They look like little wee bays. harbour on the other side of downtown is going to be a little bit different. There's a couple of buildings that come with city skylines too that just look like they'd look really good in a port or harbour area. One of them is the freight terminal. Not only does the building look like it belongs at a port, but it's got all this car park and concrete around it, which is perfect. And the other building is the post sorting facility. Again, super appropriate building and lots of concrete around it. So I'm going to put these down and terraform the coast closely around them. This part here is going to be inspired by a highway in San Francisco. We're going to have a stacked highway coming through here. I love the way that they save room or foot space. And seeing as it's going through sort of an industrial area here where lot sizes might be sort of really important, this would make sense. And the highway running through San Francisco is much the same. It's going through quite an industrial area. Unfortunately, I had a bit of an issue in game where the pillars were going through the road underneath, but I'm pretty sure I can sort this later on. So now I just want to connect up a few more major roads, get the grid pattern sorted a little bit more, and we want to get the train line down into that freight terminal, and we're ready to build out the core of our downtown finally. So our population is really getting up there now, but I'd like to add a special neighbourhood. So we're going to make a neighbourhood up here, like halfway up this little mountain, and call it Holly Hills. I'm picking from that name, you guys can guess what it's inspired by, but we'll get some really nice views of the downtown from up here. put a train station over this side of downtown that comes in from an outside connection. The roads also get extended out here in that grid-like fashion, and most of this area becomes large office space or large residential space, and with this we are going to push over 100,000 people in our city. Well, that was pretty fun, just building one big city really quickly, really. And to be honest, the performance was pretty good, and I don't have an amazing machine. I could definitely make this city bigger if I wanted, but I've got other plans with another series. But I have to say, the scale and the lighting, everything's pretty on point with City Skylines 2. This looks pretty realistic. I can't wait to dive into a new series and try some new things. If you guys enjoyed the video, you could give it a thumbs up, that would really help me out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you later. Bye.